So Dav, we've mentioned a little bit about the cultural context of ministering in Wales. Denby's quite a rural area, a rural market town. So what is it like to minister in a rural area?
I think we probably face the challenge that many small towns, villages across the UK face, that we're just missing a whole generation of people because we'll have 18, 19-year-olds leave off to university, college, and then trying to get them back is just difficult because we just don't have employment in those areas. And so having hands on deck in church on a Sunday to do lots of the things that so many churches take for granted, that's hard. I suppose one of the other challenges is just that challenge of distance between where people live. So if you're living in a very rural area, we've heard from a couple of guys here at the consultation just the last couple of days how it's very difficult for them to gather together as a home group because people are living a long way apart, or doing a pastoral visit means that driving maybe as much as an hour and a half each way. And so that can prove challenging, and trying to gather the saints for encouragement and for worship, that can be hard. I suppose we face less of that in Denby because we're in a town of 10,000 people. There are fairly good links. I think the other thing is we maybe feel slightly isolated from other similar churches. That can be the case, especially further west and further to mid-Wales you go, because the distances are great, the transport links aren't brilliant, and just having that kind of fellowship and encouragement that maybe people in larger towns or cities would have just isn't there. And there just maybe isn't the same. There maybe might be many chapels, many churches, but maybe not as many of them who have the same kind of heart or the same kind of emphasis on wanting to hear God speak from the Bible. That can be challenging.
You mentioned transport. It's really interesting. I want to pick up on that. What's the bus links like, for example, in Denby? So people might be watching this in a big city. They've got public transport everywhere. It's easy to get around. That's just not the case, is it, in North Wales?
No, not. I mean, I can't really complain. Most of the Welsh bus system is subsidised by English taxpayers. So in some ways, kind of we benefit from England's generosity. But coming to the consultation, I spent half an hour trying to work out timetables of how I could get to pick up my lift from a town half an hour away, and it just wasn't going to work by bus. So in the end, I had to get a lift. I had to ask a friend to come and bring me to connect to a lift further down here. So yeah, that's a frustration, but hey, we've got some beautiful scenery, so more than makes up for it.
So there's swings and roundabouts then when it comes to rural ministry. In terms of the gospel then, Dav, what can we, within and without FIEC, do to help the gospel in Wales?
I suppose we're grateful for people's prayers and encouragement. It can be hard. I think we're also grateful that there's this awareness, certainly within the FIEC, this awareness of not wanting to be perceived, the FIEC not wanting to be perceived as just coming in and telling Welsh Christians, Welsh evangelicals how to do things just because it's worked in X, Y and Z. I think we're possibly naturally reticent or nervous of having influences from outside kind of telling us how to do stuff. So we've been really grateful for how the FIEC has been so sensitive to that, and wanting to hear the kind of the Welsh perspective first, and not just kind of coming in and telling us what to do. So that's been brilliant. I suppose things that the FIEC could do is just kind of facilitate us meeting together, encouraging us to meet together. There is that north-south kind of split, partly just because of the transport links and the geography. Having the FIEC say, hey, let's get you all together and let's share ideas and pray with each other, and then having that kind of slightly wider perspective on what's going on just across, just to our east in England, and having some of the resources and the encouragement from those churches, the ideas, the experience, that I think we're increasingly open to in Wales, which I think is a healthy thing, because we know the situation is dire across the UK, and maybe even more so in Wales, and so we need help, we need people's prayers, and we need people. We need people to come and support us in small churches, be willing to, I suppose, take up their cross and come to small rural communities and live distinctive Christian lives and get alongside people. People are surprisingly open. I suppose that's one thrill we have, is that people want to talk about their lives and their struggles. There maybe isn't the same kind of reticence or nervousness about sharing your life with people. So that's a great thrill, a great opportunity, really.
So just finally then, Dav, give us a couple of prayer points, how people can pray for the work in Wales.
Oh, thank you. We value your prayers. I suppose specifically you could pray that the Lord would raise up people for the harvest field. That's a big prayer of ours, that you could pray there would be more people who'd come and do that. You could pray for those generations which have been totally disillusioned by Christianity and yet who still see a very strong affiliation with their particular chapel or denomination. And you could pray therefore that those denominations or those chapels would kind of grasp the gospel again, and there would be clarity, and if not, that people would be willing to consider coming to hear the gospel in different contexts, like we meet in a community centre. And I think that's probably a barrier for many people to kind of come to a church in a community centre, especially in Wales, because people are used to thinking of Christianity as being my chapel in my village. And so pray for people for openness, pray for, I suppose, courage for us, faithfulness to keep preaching the gospel. We know it's God's power to save all who believe, and so we value your prayers that we would be courageous in declaring God's glory, the wonder of the gospel, the riches, full life in the gospel. And so we value those things really.
Thanks, Dan.